the Fed holding off on more stimulus and recognizing the long-term nature of the global challenges. Where does that leave investors now? I want to head over to Zurich to hear from Christoph Riniker. He's head of strategy research at Bank Julius Baer. Thanks very much indeed for speaking to us. So how has Bernanke's speech in Jackson Hole impacted the appetite for risk in the markets?
Well, I would say, as he basically didn't say anything but just postponed his answer that won't change too much in the short term. I think volatility might stay elevated, and investor sentiment, although a bit better than before, might still remain on the lower side, and therefore I think that these volatile markets that we have seen in the past few days, that this will persist in the next few days as well.
What do you think it's going to take for markets to calm down, for this volatility to ease?
Well, basically it's, for the US, for example, it's still the issue of these recession fears that we still see, or investors see. In Europe, of course, as mentioned before, it's the sovereign debt crisis where we need more visibility, and if there is more coming through from this perspective, I think markets could start to ease again, or doing better, basically.
The markets are also focusing, aren't they, on US President Barack Obama's economic policy speech after the US Labor Day holiday in September. What do investors want to hear from him?
Well, we heard it on Friday from Bernanke that he's expecting the government to basically now giving measures to start improving the economy in the US again. And I think that's exactly as well as what investors are expecting, that they see that there's more help coming from different sides to improve market conditions.
And that was the interesting thing from Ben Bernanke, wasn't it? The fact that he did say the onus has to be on the politicians now to do their part in terms of fiscal programs, investment in infrastructure and so forth. How are traders, how are investors factoring that into their sort of outlook right now? Is that likely to happen given the political obstacles and protracted negotiations we saw over the US debt ceiling? How likely is it, or how straightforward will it be for Barack Obama to take action on the fiscal side?
And of course, it's a difficult question, but in fact, as I think, basically market moves will guide politics sooner or later, and so he has to take some action sooner or later until that we see an improvement and that investors will start being more constructive again. So there should be something, yes.
Now, what is your assessment of the health of Europe's banks? Of course, Christine Lagarde used her speech at Jackson Hole to really call for the urgent recapitalization of some of Europe's banks. Do you agree with that? How fragile are the banks right now?
Well, this is really, I would say, in the center of the European problem of the debt crisis, and they are quite fragile. And we see, for example, looking at CDS spreads or looking at performance and volatility, that they are quite vulnerable at the moment.
Does that mean that they do need to be recapitalized? They do need capital injections from the EFSF if they fail to raise money in the markets?
There are probably a number of banks who really need help in that regard to improve the whole situation again. Of course, it's a bit difficult now that more or less all the banks are put together in one sector, and the overall sentiment is bad. But I mean, probably there's still some difference between the different banks.
Given that the differentiation isn't being made then between the weaker banks and those that are perhaps in a stronger position, do you think liquidity could become a concern, that effectively the banks would struggle to fund themselves in the coming months?
Well, quality, as I said, is a main issue there in the banks, and I think it probably might divide the good from the bad more and more going forward. But as I said before, generally speaking, it needs more help anyway in regard to the debt crisis, that also banks as a whole can improve a lot. And so it's not just the banking sector which has a problem, it's basically more also a political environment in Europe as well as the financial environment.
Broad-ranging challenges, aren't they? Thank you so much, Christoph Riniker, Head of Strategy Research at Bank Julius Baer.